Alright, I think this might be the first video on the new phone, but we'll see how well it does. The new one's a Moto G Stylus 5G, the old one was one of the original Moto G Styluses, so we'll see how it goes. I think my next project, two of the next projects were supposed to involve milling, and I think the next one is going to be to make a protective cover to go over these threads, so that when I am doing milling, nothing falls and hits that and messes those up, because that would be bad. So the only thing that I have, well, the options are this small one, which would leave like a 1/4 inch, so like an 1/8 inch thick wall on each side, which theoretically would work, but I think this one, even though it's oversized, would give me more protection. So I think I'm going to try this. So first is to slab off a section that is that long and then go from there. So let's see how that goes. Alright, first I'm going to mark it up and then try and cut it off. And I think I used I say this later, but I think I used the wrong blade. I think it's too fine of a tooth. And as I got down through, it did eventually work, but as I got down through, I had to move it over as you saw, and yeah. It's just a lot of work sawing, and I missed the cool part. I don't know if that was a good blade choice, but I was vibrating the heck out of everything. Everything kept falling. So much so that something fell down and hit my keyboard and hit the stop button. So I missed the end, but basically when it cut off, and then it fell over there. This part is too hot to touch, so there's no way that I'm touching that part. So we'll wait till that cools off and then we'll do the next step. Alright, now I got that cut off. First, I gotta get it all set up in the lathe. And then I'm going to face the front off, or face the first side off, so it's nice and flat. And one thing I noticed was this, because when I bought it off of eBay, it looks like they cut it off with one of those discs, not a saw. So I think it got really hot on the one side where they cut it, because when I played with it later in the drill press, it was really hard cutting through the first section with the drill, and that was interesting. So first I just realized, like, okay, don't use the big bit, use your center bit. You know this, you haven't done it for a while, but you know these steps. So then I got the center drill out and did that, and then realized I had to get that out of the way in order for it to fit. Got that in there, then got the small bit, and went the whole way through with that one. Realize, you know, it's small lathe, it won't even go through that without moving the whole thing forward. Then switch to the bigger bit and just take it slow and work on the chips. And yeah, it does pretty good. So I think this was the side that it was softer, and then later it ends up going and it's really slow and you see the really tiny chips, because again it's really hard to get through. See, it's almost like fluff versus chips, and it's just because it was really hard and didn't want to go, and would stall the lathe out and didn't want to go, and eventually I gave up drilling with that. And yeah, just it's taken a super long time, and so yeah, eventually I give up with this because it's just taking forever. And sometimes I'd get bigger chips, and then went back to the really tiny stuff. So I definitely think the side where they cut off using the cutoff disc, it's one of those fiber discs. I think they must have got it really hot or something, because later, like for this part and the drilling part, it did weird, and later with some of the machining, it did weird. So yeah, very strange. Well, I managed to get it with the smaller bit, which is 9/32, and I managed to get it with this larger bit, which is 17/32, but I didn't manage to get it the whole way through because it's just taken a super long time. Besides the fact that there's the one that I got it through, this is the one I have to get through. So this is 7/8. 17/32 is just right over a ½ inch, as everybody knows. So yeah, I got to go a bit further. So I'm going to swap this over to the drill press, which will run a little bit better, and it'll still stall out, but not as easily as this. First, I was initially going to try with that way, or I should say, first I set it up and centered it with the same size bit in the small hole, and you may not have been able to tell there, but when I first went through, it was just tiny chips with the 7/8 bit, and then you saw it went and did the bigger chips. And then I tried to get it,
and realized that I don't have the right tap wrench size. So I had to use my 2 crescent wrenches, and then it got down through, and you see it got really tight. And it got tight enough that I was moving my regular bench vise. So it's like, okay, what the heck? So I worked and retightened that, put oil on it. That might have been part of the problem, but I also just tiny little bits. Turn, go back, turn, go back, turn, go back, turn, go back. Yeah, this is a 1-inch tap, and that was a 7/8 inch hole, so it takes a lot of work. But the oil seemed to have helped in just going really tiny increments. And I also do think it was because it was harder on the one side than the other, because it eased up after it got down towards the other side for the cutting. And yeah, and then got it back out, flipped it over, put it back in the lathe, cleaned up a little bit. Alright, face off for the sections where it made a mess of the surface. And you can see I had to use the big crescent wrench for that. And yeah, face it off to get it all cleaned up from where the threading put little extra bits on the surface again. And then yeah, just clean that up, switch it around, clean the other side up, try and clean up the edges. And yeah, there we go. And that's better chamfers. And that's it for that section.
Well, it's partly done. I'm not sure if it works. And ideally, I had wanted to try and put some flats on both sides with the milling attachment, just to be able to tighten it up versus just finger tight. Let's see if it fits. But let's see. Ooh, that's a good sign. It wobbles. I think that's okay. Doesn't go in very far. So I think what I need to do, because there's this little step there, I need to, on one of the sides, take out some of the threads so that, yeah, it's loose, but that's okay. It just has to protect the threads. It doesn't have to be a tight fit. So I need to get some of the threads off, probably back about that far on the one side, and then it would spin the rest of the way on up to that shoulder, and then yeah, I still might need to take some off the end, but yeah, we'll see. But I ran out of time today. That's pretty good though. It did what I wanted to so far.
Now that I made sure that it was the correct size for the threads that would actually go on, I decided to try and use the specialty bars to go on the inside and cut that out, because I have to cut out that slot that will go over that lip. And I did not, as I found out after this section, it was just doing horrible, and it was making an awful finish. And I figured out what the problem was. I had it at the wrong height, and if you are not cutting at center, it cuts at the wrong spot on the tool, and it just does not work right. So this first section I went and suffered through, but you can see there the surface finish is horrible. So I got it in again and lowered the thing, and now I'm going to try and clean up the surface finish. And amazingly enough, with it set correctly, even though you can't really see what's going on, it cleaned up the surface much better, and I actually got a real nice edge that I had to clean up later. But yeah, it works so much better. So if you're doing lathe work, make sure you get your cutters at the right height. That's the big key.
It's amazing what having your bit set at the correct vertical height will do. Initially, when I was trying to clean this off for that anterior edge, the bit was set too high, and that's why it was making such a rough cut. So I lowered it slightly, and it cleaned that up to a much nicer shoulder. And then the cool thing is, I think I guessed correctly on the length to be that much, because if I spin this on here, it goes back and it stops, and there's that much left over. And the cool thing is, if I take this, that goes in, there's plenty of clearance. That's going to work perfect. This is now protected. Next thing I gotta do is make some flats on here, similar to this has, just so I can get a wrench on there. I don't know that it's gonna be needed, but it's at least better than just finger tight. That way I'll be able to hold it slightly with a wrench. Let's try that next. So that means I gotta set up for milling.
Now back to the milling thing to try and get the little side bits on there. And initially I took a little bit too heavy a cut, so I moved it up and then just again worked across, same as before. I didn't measure for these cuts. I just did it by eye, and as you'll see later, my eye was off between the two sides, but it doesn't matter. I literally just needed two flat sides. So this side was a deeper cut. That's okay. If I get fed up with it looking slightly off later, I can get my calipers and make the two sides match, but it works for what it needs to be, so I'm probably not going to touch it. I'm just going to use it like it is. But yeah, this is really cool. I'm so far really enjoying having this functionality, and that's why I bought this lathe, because it was the right price. It was within a mile of my house, and it came with the milling attachment.
Alrighty then. They're not even. It doesn't matter. It's a shop project. We know it fits up on here. If I get it spun on correctly. Come on, straighten it up. Alright. Now we got the little flats. And I will not be able to hold this straight because I need two hands for that, and I have my video thing on. But that goes up on. So that works perfect, because this is the big wrench, the big 15-inch one that I'm doing with all this. That fits up on there great. And we take this. That goes up on there. Yeah, I think it's going to work. One thing I just realized that I might have an issue with, that I might have to fix. But that's okay. That's why we test these things. Is since this is how I was supposed to hold that, I think I can still get it in there. Let's see. It helps if I tighten it up correctly. Oh, yes. That fits just in the little slot, and it's just in between there. Let's see, loosen it slightly. You can't get better than that. It's the width of the wrench between this part and the end of the flat on there. That's awesome. Perfect. I don't even have to change it for that. Alright, because then I use this with the combination wrench of this to go on here to tighten up the collet. So that means I can get this on there to tighten it. I can get this on there to tighten it and loosen it. That's perfect. That's exactly what I needed. And of course, this little bar I made goes right in there. Today I added a little marker line. But then when that's in there, you get it in there and you spin, 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 spin. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Till it's about right there. And then you take the little hammer and you tap. And your check comes out. And life is good. That's a 100% successful project. And now I not only got to use the milling machine attachment for the lathe, but I have something that will work on here to protect those threads. So that's great.